Here are three images for Lent. Abram being told to leave his hometown and go to some place he doesn't know. It's kind of called the Promised Land. In other words, something like this: Abram, step out of your comfort zone. The second one has to do with a thing Father Michael Joncas, who's a professor at the University of St. Thomas and St. Paul, a really excellent preacher and theologian, liturgical theologian and composer. He's the guy that wrote On Eagle's Wings that some of you might remember. He gave a talk about 25 years ago and introduced it this way when he was teaching undergrads at the University of St. Thomas. He said, these are like 19-year-olds or something. My job here is to break your heart and to let you know you're not the center of the world. I was really struck by that. And I was thinking, I'm glad no one told me that when I was 19. I'd have gone crazy. Or, no, actually what I'd have done is say, oh, okay, and continued on my merry way being the center of the world. A third image has to do with this. It's in the risk of taking a step out of our comfort zones, as Abram and Sarai and the family did, that we can discover our frozen hearts and possibly bring them to the light where they might thaw out a little bit. That's kind of what I'm working with right now. So here's a way I'm going to look at the gospel today. I want to step back. This starts chapter 17, but in chapter 16, immediately before going up the mountain with these guys and, dazzling white and all that, he said, "Who do people say that I am?" Peter told him, "You're the Messiah of God." Bingo. And then began to describe how the Son of Man must suffer, be rejected by the chief priests, elders, suffer, die, and rise on the third day. And Peter said, don't you think about that. To which he said, "Get behind me, Satan," because he was tempting him. Here, it just hit me today. Jesus takes the three, Peter, James, and John, up to the same mountain where he was tempted. We heard about it last week for the third temptation. The devil took him to the highest mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world. Now, I don't know if it's, physically what the heck, but it's theologically the same mountain, because it's described as a high mountain. And mountains especially high mountains in the Old Testament, have two sides to them. They're the place of revelation. On the mountain, God told Abraham at that time, to take his son up and offer him in sacrifice. And then said, okay, you showed yourself this way. And Abram, you showed yourself faithful. And Abram called it the mountain on which God provides, because God provided a ram for sacrifice. And it was the mountain, Mount Horeb, where Moses took his flock into the wilderness in Exodus. He walked out there, and on Mount Horeb, there's this bush that's burning, and he has an encounter with God. And after the Exodus, that's where he goes for 40 days, a couple times, up on the mountain with God for 40 days, and he comes back 2 times with the 10 Commandments. The first time he got ticked off and broke them. Long story. Went back up, got them again. All kinds of stuff happens on mountains. And it's about the revelation of who God is. And that's what's at stake here. Who is this God revealed in this passage here? But the mountains, especially the high mountains, starting from the book of Deuteronomy, which is the 5th of the first 5 books of the Bible, starting from Deuteronomy, it's talked about as the place where people build their altars to idols. And there's bunches of references through the prophets, through the wisdom literature, and in the starting with Deuteronomy, and then in the historical literature, about this is the place of idolatry. So it puts a new twist on what John the Baptist says. The mountains shall be brought low and the valleys raised. Because both places, valleys and mountains, were places of idolatry. It's very funky. And so when Jesus takes these guys up to the same mountain where he was tempted to look at the whole world and fall down and worship, he takes them up, seems to me now, to face the same temptation in a different way.